This week on Behind the Headlines, we will recap all the movies that have come out in 2015 and narrow down the list of the best movies of the year with our film critic, Peter Canavese. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Sure, good to be here.
Well, in your story this week, recapping the year in movies, you mentioned that close to 1,000 came out this year in big screens across America, and you had the unenviable task of narrowing down to just 10, which you compare to Sisyphus.
Yeah.
If instead of rolling a boulder, he got to watch movies all the time. But nevertheless, it does seem like a challenge. Can you tell me a little about your process in winnowing down from hundreds of movies to the best of the best?
Right. Well, I do take it very seriously. So I print out a list of all those, those 987 movies, and I pore over it multiple times, and kind of make smaller and smaller lists until I can whittle it down to 10. And for me, I think I mentioned in the article, one of the major criteria that I apply is the film. It has to be sort of extraordinary in some way. It has to be kind of exciting in some way, creatively exciting, fresh, original, meaningful is important too. I think that was kind of a tiebreaker for a lot of movies this year, is what movies meant the most.
So it has to be relevant to whatever's happening in some ways.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I also mentioned, if it's a supremely entertaining movie, then I have no problem, putting that as a top 10 movie or a number one movie even. For me, I think a lot of people for many people this year, probably Star Wars was that movie, but for me, that was sort of so-so. A lot of Hollywood movies this year, I think, were just sort of so-so.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, because your list gave me this roller coaster of emotions. As soon as I saw it, I was screaming, "Where's Spotlight?" But then, after reflecting a little bit more, I figured I probably don't need Peter to tell me that Spotlight was one of the best movies of the year. So I came around to actually really liking the list, because it exposed me to some of the movies that I haven't seen throughout the year. And I saw one recently, A Beast of No Nations, which did make your top 10 list. And I thought it was phenomenal. So thank you for going beyond kind of the normal. But
I have to say, I did think of Spotlight sitting here in the newsroom.
I'm very biased about Spotlight.
Yes, the excitement, the bustle out around here. Spotlight's an excellent film, by the way. I think everyone should see it.
Number 11?
I think it's somewhere in my runners-up, but it kind of lacks a little something to elevate it for me into the top tier.
Well, one thing that did strike me about your list, and we're going to get to the number one movie in a second, but I was struck by the geographic reach. I mean, we go from the Armenian genocide to the ultra-diverse neighborhood of Jackson Heights in Queens, and you got Timbuktu in Mali.
Yeah.
So was this kind of geographic reach a purposeful kind of criteria when you were looking? I mean, there's a lot of international flavor here.
Right. Well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to limit myself to domestic releases, right? Cinema is global, and one of the most exciting things about seeing a lot of movies is that you can learn a lot about the world from your seat in the Bay Area here. That is purposeful to some degree. I think it ended up that way, that the list was that diverse globally, partly because domestic films were sort of semi-mediocre this year. There weren't that many exciting films by American filmmakers, I felt, this year. There were a lot of excellent movies. It was a year of dozens of excellent movies, like 3.5 star out of 4-star movies for
Spotlight.
me. Yeah, Spotlight was one of them, yeah. But when it came to trying to tiebreak amongst all of those excellent films, these were the ones that were most interesting and politically relevant, like you say.
And I think the number one movie, which we'll just go out and say it, it's Peter's number one movie, is Chi-Raq. It's and basically that does have an American filmmaker, although Spike Lee, who's been kind of had a sort of up and down career. I think it's safe to say last few decades. I think for people like myself, he's still best known for Do the Right Thing, which is like huge social justice and just like a great movie. Yeah. But then in the mid 2000s, that decade, he had movies like Inside Man, 25th Hour, more kind of more conventional. So tell us a little about Chi-Raq, and specifically, I'm curious: is Spike Lee back to the Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee?
Well, I think he got a little mojo back this year. He made 2 films this year, actually. The other one was The Sweet Blood of Jesus, which came out in, I think, February, and which is a semi-vampire kind of remake film of a movie called Ganja and Hess. But anyway, Chi-Raq is kind of vintage Spike Lee in that it's very fierce. It's impassioned right? And yeah, it just feels like he's reconnected with his creative energy in a big way. He's been doing a fair number of like remakes and kind of Hollywood
She Hate
kind of
Me?
movies. Yeah, actually I don't hate She Hate Me, but that's one people tend to pummel on. But yeah, things like the Old Boy remake and Miracle of St. Anna was a dud. But yeah, this is much more in line with his really bold political themed movies. You mentioned Do the Right Thing, also Bamboozled, movies like that are just, it's a very creative take on the issue, which is gun violence is the main issue here, which was, of course, one of the big news stories of the year as well.
Yeah, and so what was it about Chi-Raq that elevated it over every other movie this year for you?
Well, it was a year where not a lot of filmmakers were taking risks, and it's a creatively risky movie. It's all done in verse. It is actually kind of a remake because it's a sort of reimagining of Lysistrata, the Greek comedy, and he approaches it from a scriptwriting perspective. He and his co-screenwriter to write it in verse, and that was creative. And then, of course, he's a visually dynamic filmmaker always, even when he's at his worst. And he's assembled an interesting cast and put them through their paces.
Yeah, Nick Cannon isn't your typical person you would think of with that kind of movie. So
Right.
There are several.
Yeah, and he's very good. And the film opens with a Nick Cannon song that's very powerful.
Yeah, and some of the other movies on your list take place in Africa. We got Timbuktu and we got Beasts of No Nation. Can you say a little about those two movies and what struck you about them that gave them, top standing?
Yeah, I'll say about Beasts of No Nation first because it's more of a smooth segue from Chi-Raq, I think. This domestic film, it has a feel of what Hollywood used to do almost more as a matter of course. It's a very cinematic movie using kind of a healthy budget, and it's got a star in Idris Elba. And in some ways, it's very traditional. It's also very visceral, violent, and it addresses something that we're kind of familiar with politically, but it does it in this way that is psychologically piercing, I think. It's not very literal, never names the West African nation that they're in, but it's about this child soldier and his trajectory, like how he gets pulled into that world and how he reacts to it and grows in ways good and bad. And also the psychology of the Idris Elba character, the commander.
The commander.
Yeah.
I thought he was phenomenal as always, but as this kind of evil, almost heartless, manipulative guy who raises an army of child soldiers. But I don't want to give away many spoilers. But
yeah, though I'll also say one of the best things about that film is the scene where you sort of feel bad for the Idris Elba character when he's not really getting what he wants out of his career as a commander.
Yeah, it's like for anybody who familiar with Stringer Bell, it'll ring familiar.
Yeah.
And what about Timbuktu, which is another part of Africa? This one we do know where it is.
Right, Mali.
It's called Timbuktu.
Yeah, right. Timbuktu is just another one of those movies that's it's very relevant to what we're going through globally. Specifically, in this case, fundamentalism and how that affects people on the ground, just the average everyday people, in this case a cattle herder and his family. And it's just this pernicious influence that goes all through the community and makes life extremely difficult and unpleasant. And then it's just a beautifully made film. It's beautifully shot. The cinematography is really phenomenal. So yeah, it's just an artful, poetic, confidently made film about a difficult and important subject.
Well, I can't wait to see it. And by the way, the Beast of No Nation is actually one of the few movies that's available on Netflix now. So, yeah, I highly recommend it. But problems closer to home. I want to ask you about The Big Short.
Yeah.
Because this is a movie I've been hearing a lot about last few weeks and months. I mean, I haven't heard that much when it came out, but I feel like pretty much everybody who's seen it that I spoke to told me that they were surprised by how much they ended up liking it and kind of the creative ways that the filmmaker Adam McKay goes in showing these really complicated kind of shenanigans that have taken place on Wall Street.
Right.
The Big Short is on your top 10 list. Can you talk a little about why you consider that to be one of the best of the year?
Yeah, I still have a vivid memory of sitting down and watching it, and it kind of just walloping me in how it's a very direct movie about how we got into the recent financial crisis and how we haven't really gotten ourselves out of it as much as we might think we have. How we're poised to repeat the same mistakes we've made, and how no prosecutions have come to pass, and that sort of thing. I think from a distance, maybe what you were describing a little bit, it might look like a sort of fluffy Hollywood comedy, or it might be sort of flimsy, or
It's got the big names, the ensemble cast. It's like
Steve Carell and Christian Bale and Ryan Gosling and Brad Pitt are sort of the quartet of stars that are there. So it looks like a big Hollywood movie, and it is, but it's also sort of audacious in how it addresses a subject that's not very sexy, all these financial matters, and somehow makes them comprehensible and entertaining. It's an entertaining movie, and it's a comedy drama, and both of those elements kind of work. It moves along with kind of an energy to it, and then by the end of the movie, you feel angry at sort of what we've been sold.
Oh. And this is another movie in your top 10 list. It's kind of it seems like less of an angry, less of a sensationalist movie, but it looks very interesting. And I haven't actually heard of it up until reading list. In Jackson Heights, I mean, you kind of contrasted with the kind of bleeds it leads ethos that newsrooms tend to embrace at times. But you're saying that this one was not sensationalist; it was more of kind of like a true-to-life portrayal of this really, really diverse area in Queens. Why did you like In Jackson Heights so much?
It's a documentary, and it's a fly-on-the-wall documentary, which, for me, those are my favorite kind, as opposed to the really heavily assembled sort of talking head kind of documentaries. This one has no talking heads, and it's made by Frederick Wiseman. He has a formula of sorts, which might seem at odds with what I'm saying about liking audacious films, but his formula is so effective as a documentarian. He just goes to a place and shoots hours and hours and hours and hours of footage, and he has a technique that enables him to, at least what he edits together, people seem completely unaware of the cameras. They don't play to the cameras at all. They don't seem to be protecting their own self-interest. They just seem to be living in front of the camera. So it's kind of like having great access to that community in a way that you mightn't if you just visited it yourself. You wouldn't be able to spend this much time and have this much of a diverse view of the community. It takes you a lot of different pockets of the community.
It's just a deep dive into the life and everyday kind of honest depiction of how things are.
Right.
No, it sounds great. I do want to make a quick pivot from these movies that make you feel good and kind of that are educational and kind of powerful to the generic old popcorn flick, which many of us still love.
Right.
And 2015 has seen a few of them. And taking away the relevance thing or the kind of the artistic sense kind of thing, which movies did you find to be the most entertaining, just from a pure escapist perspective this year?
Right. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed Star Wars, for starters. That's the big one that everyone wants to know about. Though I think it's sort of one of those you don't miss the water till the well runs dry things about George Lucas. I miss George Lucas and the sort of art that he brought to those movies. This one is, I think, more of a sort of just pure thrills kind of movie.
Do you think the prequels made this movie seem better, just by comparison?
Well, for some, yes, I think so. But for me, this movie makes the prequels look better because they're so much more wildly creative and bold and audacious. Just the idea of having Darth Vader as a kid in the first movie. And he took a lot of risks, and he shows you all these different worlds you've never seen before in Star Wars in those prequels, whereas this one kind of feels like a rehash of all the kinds of things we've seen before. It's very nostalgia-driven. But anyway, everyone's going to have their own opinion about Star Wars.
It seems like most people love the rehash much more than the truly original prequels that you seem to respect more than a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. But for other popcorn movies, I think I'm kind of a sucker for the Marvel movies. Like Ant-Man came out this year, and that was a very entertaining movie in terms of the action and the creativity of how the action was staged and the acting, the characterizations were all kind of just fun. Yeah. And not very meaningful, but a lot of fun.
And I feel like, in addition to, we talked about Star Wars a second ago, it's not the only kind of franchise that kind of had this kind of, fell on kind of weird times and then came out in 2015, revved up and powerful. We saw the resurgence of Rocky, for example.
Yes, we did.
Creed, which I thought was terrific. And it's also one of those movies that you have to have a few bad ones to appreciate the really good one once it's back. And another comeback that I think was another franchise that kind of made a comeback is Mad Max. And I saw, and I saw Charlize Theron character in Mad Max won your title as the best villain.
Yeah, the hero of the year, actually. Yeah.
Oh, the hero. Sorry.
Right, yeah.
So tell me a little about your take on Creed and the new Mad Max movie that came out this year.
Yeah, Mad Max actually is topping a lot of top 10 lists, and it's getting critics awards and all that sort of thing, which is
Who'd have thunk it?
yeah, and I liked it. I thought it was quite good. It is sort of an artful take on the blockbuster movie. It's almost a silent film in the way it prioritizes visuals, and it's a very kinetic movie. So I like it quite a bit, and it is a sort of, it's bold in that Mad Max is the ostensible hero, but he's muzzled for most of the movie, and Charlize Theron character is really the driving character in that film. And Creed, yeah, I actually think Rocky Balboa is an excellent movie. That's the previous one. The last one that Stallone was the writer-director of. But yes, certainly that franchise has been up and down over the years. And this one
Actually, I think 5 was probably the one dip.
Yeah.
Because 4's got the Ivan Drago.
Right.
But
yeah. I think they had a good idea of how to reboot the franchise here. I think it's going to work for them, and they're going to be off to the races with a whole new series of films with the Michael B. Jordan character, the son of Apollo Creed.
Oh, I think it was amazing how they just kind of take this kind of old nostalgia over the old Rocky movies. Rocky, you get to pretty much watch Rocky turn into Mickey, and you have all the montage scenes, you have the music, and yet you also bring in an actor who's kind of the definition of relevant today. The Wire, Fruitvale Station. Michael B. Jordan was amazing in that. So you expect to see more Creed sequels?
I do. I think there'll be umpteen Creed sequels probably, as long as it keeps making money.
I should point out, 2015 has been a terrible year for real boxing. After watching the Mayweather-Pacquiao and then watching the Klitschko fight last month, it was just like two heavyweights standing around for 12 rounds. So I feel like fake boxing has kind of overtaken real boxing thanks to Creed.
Yeah.
So it
we might see.
It was very cathartic after, especially for all the people who probably paid $99 for the Mayweather-Pacquiao.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we might see Sylvester Stallone at the Oscars actually in the supporting category for that movie.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I thought he had a very warm kind of performance in that. Well, let's talk about some of the lemons.
Okay.
let's talk about some of the movies you panned. First of all, Peter's lemon list has a great drinking game for you. If you go see Chappie, have a swig every time you hear that mentioned.
Yeah, I'm afraid. Yeah, I say in the piece there, I'm afraid that do not try that at home because you'll probably end up in the hospital. Just kidding.
But Chappie's one of the misses of the year for you. It's like a runaway robot, kind of a little take on RoboCop and some of the other kind of conventional robot movies. And you didn't think it brought anything new to the genre?
No, I think it really felt like a lot of rehashing again. It sort of emblematizes for me the Hollywood. We're just going to mine what's worked before, and there's no real out of the box thinking in that movie, I think, and it's just annoying. That's the only word I can come up with for Chappie. Is it's an annoying movie. It's done at this. It's like at 11 for 2 hours and just doesn't stop. It's relentless, I didn't find the humor in it or the excitement in it.
But that's not the worst movie of the year for you.
No,
the worst one takes on much more somber subjects, more realistic ones.
Yeah,
Atomic Weapons, Little Boy.
Yeah. Well, just thinking back over the year, that movie just stood out as one that it's certainly audacious, it's certainly bold in what it does. In some ways, there are moments in it, if you take just like one scene out of it here or there, it can be a kind of a nuanced movie, but it's all kind of built around this pun in the title of this little kid. It's about a little kid, but it's also leading up to the big climax. I guess it's a spoiler, folks, is the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are predicated as being like the answer to this boy's prayers. This boy is hoping for a miracle to get his father home from World War II. And he's praying and praying that something will happen that will bring his father home. And then the bombs drop. So he gets his wish, basically.
So the premise is very shaky, and we could say controversial and possibly distasteful. aside from that, was the movie just poorly made, or is that your main concern?
That was my main
the premise
concern.
that two atomic bombs blowing up is an answer to a boy's prayers.
Yeah, that was my main concern. But it has some sort of nice elements to it because leading up to that, I say the racial politics are confused because there's a relationship between the boy and an elderly Japanese man, where they're kind of like learning to understand each other. So some of that plays just fine in a kind of Hallmark Hall of Fame movie of the week kind of way. But the kid's also not a terrific actor, which doesn't help.
I feel like you have to get many, many things right if you treat like such a somber subject with like a cute premise. And I mean, I kind of struggled when I was watching Life is Beautiful many years ago for similar reasons.
Right.
So it's like it has to be perfect if you're gonna play with the idea of nuclear war.
Yeah, you better really know it. You really have better thought it out quite a bit if you're gonna have that gambit. Yeah.
And some of the others, movies that did not make your top list by a long shot, The Boy Next Door.
Oh yeah, yeah, J-Lo. That's just a kind of cookie cutter thriller of the kind we used to see a lot in the 80s and 90s, the kind of Fatal Attraction sort of thing, where there's the psycho who just seems to be very normal. You know, he's so normal for weeks, and then suddenly he snaps and he's a complete psycho and he's stalking you. And
so you've seen it before, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of meant to flatter J-Lo as a star. Like of course, if J-Lo were to reject you, you would go crazy and you'd have to, follow her around. Couldn't take no for an answer.
I'll put that on my list of movies not to see. And so, taking in aggregate everything you've seen, which is what, about 200 movies this year?
Yeah, over 200.
You probably watched as many movies as I've seen council meetings. But I didn't have to suffer through Chappie, though. So what, in your opinion, is the state of Hollywood based on everything you've seen? Or not just Hollywood, the movie industry in general? Because it seems like you liked many international movies, but...
Right. Well, I wish...
How optimistic should we be about movies?
Right. Well, I wish those international films, like the list... is kind of, you have to seek these movies out. You have to kind of work to find some of these. Not all of them, but some of them. And so I think the art house culture is sort of also threatened in the current state of movies. A lot of the art houses have sort of turned to the multiplex kind of character, and they're trying to appeal, to just get more butts and seats. Hollywood is still trapped in this mindset of only the tried and true. That's what's working for them. To reboot, to remake, to sequelize. There's just not a lot of fresh films. At this time of year, you see all the awards movies that are a little more serious-minded, but most of the rest of the year, it's kind of dispiriting. A lot of animated movies and big special effects movies and superhero movies are a big trend, of course. Enjoyable, but I wish we were seeing more of the kind of risk-taking movies from the 70s, like Star Wars in 1977. Now that's commonplace, but it was a huge risk at the time.
So it sounds like to see the best of the best, you have to kind of put in some effort and seek it out and not expect it to come to the theater near you these days.
Yeah. It's the age of Netflix and Amazon and Redbox and all that.
Or go to the one remaining video store that's left in your town.
Right.
Cool. And you mentioned a few minutes ago that you wouldn't be surprised to see Sylvester Stallone show up at the Academy Awards in the Best Supporting Actor. I wanted to put you on the spot and think, based on what you've seen this year, what do you think would be your top pick for the major categories? Let's say Best Picture, Actor, Actress.
Yeah. Well, I think Spotlight is the front runner for Best Picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a good consensus choice. Like everyone agrees that it's a fine film.
Well, everyone in my newsroom agrees, but
it's
a selective demographic.
Right, I suppose. But I think most people who see that movie walk out saying, "Yeah, that was a good movie. That was a well-made film." And it's got a good roster of actors there. Probably because of the ensemble nature of the movie, probably none of those people are going to actually get Oscars this year. The actors. Best Actor could be Leonardo DiCaprio's year. The Oscars from The Revenant. The Oscars like suffering, and this is a movie that just puts him through his paces. He suffers for 2 hours.
So that's the key to winning an Oscar now. Suffering.
Suffering, or the disease thing is always a winner, right?
Okay.
But there weren't any big disease movies this year, so I think it might be Leo's year. We'll see. Best Actress. I'm drawing a blank. I don't know.
We can come back to it, but you think Stallone has a shot at in the supporting role, or do you see him just getting a nomination maybe?
I think he's probably a lock for a nomination. I don't know if he'll win. That's always actually the most competitive category for whatever reason. Best supporting actor. Yeah, there's usually.
I can think of a few people in Spotlight who could. I mean, Stanley Tucci's always great, and any of those people. But
so we'll see. But I just think the Oscars like comebacks as well, and they like nostalgia and that sort of thing.
And I know Cate Blanchett's been getting a lot of buzz for Oscars, and you've seen Kill recently. Do you think she has a decent shot?
Yeah,
keeping in mind that winning an Oscar doesn't necessarily mean this is your favorite movie.
Right.
This is what the Academy Awards.
Yeah, she's definitely got a shot. Though I wonder, she's kind of a known quantity, and
she just won one.
Yeah, she's just won one recently, and she was in 2 movies this year that were awards worthy. The other one being Truth, another journalism movie. But yeah, Carol's the one. If she's going to get nominated, it'll be for Carol, I think. I just don't know if she's going to win.
Well, I want to look ahead in the last few minutes we have here. Let's look ahead to 2016. Are there any movies that are going to be coming out or that are coming out now that you're really excited about and that you think are going to be relevant in the next few months?
Right. I get asked that question a lot, and my answer is always no. Okay. I don't really look forward to anything in particular because
it's just a job for you.
It's not that. It's not that. It's just that I tend to focus on what's in front of me at the moment because I don't like to get caught up in hype and the build-up. I try not to watch the trailers before I go, and as all the footage is rolling out, because that can get in your head and mess with your head. Of course, a movie like Star Wars, even if you avoided all the footage, you can't avoid the hype, right? It's all around you in every store.
It's on your potato chips.
Right. So it can be difficult to do that, but I think I do my job better if I don't go in with expectations that it's going to be horrible or that's going to be great, but if I go in with a completely open mind. That said, there's another Star Wars movie coming out next winter, right? 2016.
More colorful potato chips.
Rogue One. So that leaps to mind, I guess, as something we'll all be interested to see if it's good or not.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I think I think this wraps up our the final edition for Behind the Headlines. I want to thank once again our guest Peter Canavese for coming in here and sharing us his thoughts on the best 2015 has to offer. And thank you so much, and hope you have a great 2016.